Hello YouTube, what's poppin'? It is your boy Lil Hope Plays. Today we are back for some more PBO content. Of course, we are the coach of New York Nickets, but we are not actively in Season 3. Did want to take a bit of a break, but I am a moderator and helping out a whole bunch for the league. And for Season 3, a lot has changed. So, going into Season 3, we now have two divisions, a Unova Division and a Kalos Division. The Unova Division is a more experienced type playstyle for more experienced players, and the Kalos Division being for less experienced players. We also have new rules of no item clause, and we're also doing best of one now. We also had a harder drafting system with less OU mons and more reliant on lower tier mons. As you can see from the upcoming drafts, you'll understand that basically no one has a perfect draft, and that's kind of designed in that way of points were really tough to basically not allow any more than 3 OU mons for this season. So you'll see a lot of spice and a lot of cool ways of people building to finish out their drafts. Also, we have new tera rules. Option 1 allows you to pick a mon from an orange or yellow tier pick and then choose 3 typings for it. Or you could have 2 tera captains from the lower tiers of, I think it's green and blue, but only have them have 2 tera types. So we'll look into that more as we go. Sorry, I'm literally going off like a checklist because I have so much to talk about. These videos will basically be going over strictly the Kalos Division. Basically, I want to have go over the games each week. Of course, they'll be a week behind, but basically have some positive criticism for the players so that they can work and improve on their game. Of course, like none of it is meant to hurt anyone's feelings. It's totally supposed to be critical in the sense of wanting them to improve, but also giving like positive feedback, basically. Today we are going to go over all the drafts, but in the future we're going to go week by week of going through everyone's games. We do have 12 players in this league, and we are going over the Kalos Division. Of course, I will plug all the YouTube channels for both the Unova and the Kalos Division in the description if they do have some, and I'll also have the name of the coaches labeled. And of course, I think on Sonoran Flying's channel he's going to be doing the game of the week, I think for both Unova and Kalos, so make sure that you're staying tuned for that. But also there are some new Unova teams. I think Wichita Weavile is also doing some YouTube videos. I'll make sure to link them in the description. I think Noivern's also doing one. So if you guys are interested in draft content, this is a draft content, by the way, Pokemon Battle Organization, a draft like a showdown league, then stay tuned. But without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into this. I can't believe I literally said Pokemon Battle Organization is a draft league at the very end of this. I'm so stupid. Okay, so we are going to be going over drafts today, and this is mostly for the coaches to learn what they picked, as well as comment on the teams if there's anything lacking, if there's anything like major problem, blah blah blah. I am going to be using this document. I'll make sure to link it in the description. This document is not everything, of course. Like, it doesn't even show you rapid spin or defoggers, which is super important, especially for this type of format, but like it's still decent and it's very useful. So I am going to be using this document today, but the whole point is to go over people's drafts, as well as go over the Pokemon. So it's going to be a very long video, most likely. Might split up into 2 parts, who knows. But basically, I'm going to be going over each Pokemon and what they can do, some viability things that they can do for the coaches that might be new, that have never used these Pokemon before, as well as for opposing teams to watch out for. So starting off, we have the Pittsburgh Scizzors, and off the rip, they have an Iron Treads, a Slitherwing, which they chose as their Tera Captain as option 1, meaning they get 3 Tera types, and they chose, I believe it is Bug, Fire, and Electric. Yep, that is correct. So I guess I'll go straight into why they chose those Tera typings. First of all, first impression, Slitherwing with Tera Bug is absolutely no joke. It is incredibly strong. You have to be careful of that. Bug, and making you a bug type is actually super strong, especially for first impression. But ultimately, it's not like a bad typing to choose. You also get stronger U-turns and etc. For Electric, this Pokemon does get Wild Charge, so it's going to boost that Wild Charge damage, and it also allows you to hit flying types that your stab normally can't, as well as their fire typing actually is pretty unique. Of course, it allows them to hit, offensively with that fire type stab of Tera Blast, but also allows them to not get burned, which is often like a big counterplay on Slitherwing, is that you can burn it, but if you're just Tera Fire, you cannot burn it. So it's a very good Tera type options. Next we have Sylveon, obviously good Pokemon. Frostlass, Gothitelle, Corvisquire, that is an NFE pick, and everyone had to at least have one NFE pick. That is based off the draft design, but they chose Corvisquire, Goodra, Salazzle, Serena, Persian Alolan, and Electrode. So I don't want to dive in too deep on the Mons just yet, we'll get into that, but as an overall draft, I feel like you have a lot of good options here. Offensively, Tread, Slitherwing, Sylveon, these three are just extremely dangerous. You have Frostlass, which is a good spiker and can be an amazing lead to set up spikes and then die. Gothitelle in the back is not bad. I think it's a little bit underrated. It has a hard time with its move pool, but ultimately Frisk and Competitive are decent abilities, like if someone's going to bring Intimidate against you. Frisk is really good for knowing people's items. Corvisquire, good for defog. Goodra, very defensive. Always need a dragon type on a team. Mostly what I'm looking for is Fire, Water, Grass Core. Not everything. But again, Fire, Water, Grass Core and Dragon Fairy Steel Core, often you can't go wrong with those. But of course, with this draft style, not every player is going to get a perfect team. So you're going to see from a lot of these teams that they're not going to have everything perfect. But like also it's fine, you know what I mean? Like you're not going to have everything perfect. You can still plan around that. Like it's best of one. There's a lot of shenanigans that you can do where it basically does not, you know, matter at all. So Salazzle, extremely fast. Serena with Rapid Spin, extremely good. Persian Alolan and Electrode. So looking at the squad, I mean, you have a lot of heavy speed tiers. You have a lot of hard hitters. You have the ability to set up spikes. You have the ability to set up Stealth Rocks. And you also have the ability of setting up Toxic Spikes. All of these extremely good. You have a lot of U-turn mons with, let's see, Swithering, Serena, Corvisquire, etc. I think Knockoff is honestly going to be a lot stronger than people think this season because there are going to be a lot of NFE mons running around that might end up coming to battles, so Knockoff might be pretty important. So overall, I think this team is really solid. More importantly, when I look at teams, I'm like, you have to have good spinners, and I think the combination of Serena having Rapid Spin and Corvisquire with Defog, Corvisquire, or not even, I didn't even acknowledge Treads. Treads is the best spinner in the game. And basically, if you have Serena as a backup Rapid Spinner, you can make Treads not have to waste a move slot for Rapid Spin, although having Rapid Spin could be nice on it to get a speed boost. You can basically get rid of that Rapid Spin slot on Treads and make it a lot more offensive, which I do like. And overall, this team I think is very solid. Of course, you see like these little weakness types things, but of course, it's not everything. Nothing extremely glaring because overall Ghost is kind of a hard offensive thing to watch out for. Rock is a little bit more common, but again, it's not everything. You literally have Treads, which is one of the best Pokemon in the game. Ice and Fire, again, not too prevalent because you have Goodra. Goodra is just insane for taking on crazy hits. And then for Ice, it's a little bit more bleak, but again, you can have a lot, like literally a lot of counterplay for Ice types because you have priority and such. So, all right, let's dive in a little bit deeper. This is, again, I apologize if I'm going to spoil anything that you're planning to make, but ultimately this is to help all coaches out, basically. So Iron Treads, as you know, very good Pokemon. Knockoff, Stealth Rock, Rapid Spin, Volt Switch. I think this is what makes Iron Treads slightly better than Great Tusk, at least in draft play, is that Volt Switch is an extremely good way of just getting priority. Like if a Treads comes in and you're forcing something out, you can always Volt Switch to get like switch initiative on them. Of course, they can run Earthquake, Ice Spinner, so getting ice coverage is really huge, and then like Iron Head, and ultimately this mon is just pretty solid. It does have a little bit of coverage moves. I highly recommend for each week that you always kind of check out your opponent's Pokemon and see what moves they might bring. Next is Slitherwing. Again, like I said, first impression, it does only work turn 1, but it does a lot of damage, especially if you're Tera Bug. Wild Charge, as I said earlier, for Tera Electric. Close Combat, just a stab. U-turn. This Pokemon is also pretty unique in that it does get Bulk Up, Earthquake, gets some weird, like kind of unique, but also decent special attack to use. Giga Drain, just some cool stuff here. Morning Sun, so you could even run like a bulkier set. Of course, U-turn for Switch Initiative is really crazy, and this thing got Will-O-Wisp, and I didn't even know that. Like, it's not even a Fire type. Why is this thing getting Will-O-Wisp? But overall, really cool Pokemon. Sylveon, Of course, with this thing's stats, you have to be careful of like Choice Spec Sylveon just running Pixelate Hyper Voice. If you run a Choice Specs on this thing is doing a lot of damage. But even with this special defense and this HP stat, you can still run like a Wish, Baton Pass, Protect type strategy. It doesn't get toxic, but ultimately you can Wish and Baton Pack up your squad. So it's very important that potentially you have a taunter for this if that's what comes in, or you have an effective way of taking down Sylveon, so basically that it doesn't Wish, Baton Pass its entire squad back up to full health. Next we have Frostlass, Snowcloak, Curse Body. These abilities aren't that crazy, but ultimately what this thing wants to do, I mean, it can be slightly offensive. It has decent special attack of 80 and 110 speed, so it's very fast. So the whole point of this thing is most of the time it's always a lead. It's not always necessarily the case. It does get like screens and such, Shadow Ball. Like depending on the matchup, it can do a lot. Like it also gets Thunder Wave, Will-O-Wisp, and I believe it does get Hex as well. But ultimately, this thing wants to set up spikes. It can taunt you to prevent your lead from setting up spikes or Stealth Rocks. It can Will-O-Wisp things, and then ultimately it can Destiny Bond. So this is definitely a mon to watch out for if it has Destiny Bond. Like you can even run like offensive with Sash, do a lot of damage, and then with this speed stat you can always outspeed things and then set up a Destiny Bond and then guarantee a KO. Next we have Gothitelle. First, competitive, very decent items. Main thing that you're looking out for Gothitelle is that it doesn't have like crazy good move pool. Of course getting just like standard Shadow Ball, Psychic type stuff. But I feel like the main threat is definitely Thunder Wave, Light Screen, Reflect, so setting up screens. It's got decent stats, like it's definitely not bad, but I just don't think it's doing enough damage. Of course, Calm Mindset could be good depending on the matchup. Taunt also a really good move, as well as Trick Room. So those are just some moves to look out for. I'm just like quickly going through these so we can have a little bit of understanding what these Pokemon want to do. Corvisquire, this is a backup defogger. Ultimately with Eviolite, this thing is pretty bulky. It does not have steel typing though, so I honestly did not even know that when looking at this thing. But ultimately just like flying with Eviolite is still not bad, because having one typing is, I think, definitely better than not having. So I mean, flying Rock, Ice, Electric, pretty sure that's it. So you only have like actually 3 weaknesses. Roost, Defog, U-turn, and Taunt. Ultimately it can obviously run like a Brave Bird set, or potentially like maybe Nasty Plot seems insane. If you brought Nasty Plot, you're insane. Power Trip though, kind of cool, but I think it lost what is it, Bulk Up? Yeah, this one doesn't have Bulk Up, so I think Power Trip is less useful. I definitely see this thing as just being like a Roost Defogger, U-turning out when it can't do any damage. But still not bad to have as backup defogger. I mean, still very useful. In some cases, it can definitely wall some Pokemon. So next we have Goodra. Overall, this thing is just a beast. It will have Sap Sipper as an immunity, or it could have Gooey, which can lower your speed. Ultimately, this thing just gets like crazy coverage. Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Power Whip, Sludge Bomb, Surf, Thunderbolt. Like this thing just gets crazy coverage, and it's like got decent bulk. And you could just run like 252 HP, 252 special attack, and you're doing a lot of damage. So this is something that you do have to watch out for. Most of the time, it's not really setting up on you, although it does get like Acid Armor. Substitute, you could even run like a leftover subset and try to wall stuff out. But ultimately, this thing is just really bulky and can do a lot of damage if it's invested. But most of the time, it's just going to be one of those bulky attacker type sets. Next, we have Salazzle. I freaking love Salazzle so much because it has probably the most deadliest way of destroying your whole team without like really doing it. It's just like letting your team die to Toxic basically. So Corrosion as an ability lets you allow to Toxic anything you want, even Steel types. I believe even Poison types. I haven't double checked that, but I'm almost guaranteed it's Poison types as well. And what you can basically do is you run enough speed to outspeed your opponent, put the rest in HP, and basically what you do is turn one, like so Salazzle is threatening with its high special attack stat, right? Like you can run a Nasty Plot, Dragon Pulse, Flamethrower, like Sludge Bomb, Sludge Wave set, and it do a lot of damage. So a lot of people will switch out and like go into their wall or anything to try to stop this thing. And what you actually end up doing is you rock like Black Sludge, and then you Toxic them, because you can Toxic pretty much anything, and then you substitute Protect Stall to rack up the Toxic damage while you casually get up your Black Sludge. because of how fast you are, you're most likely going to outspeed them and set up a sub every turn. So you sub protect, and basically let them die to toxic. And this set is extremely deadly if people do not know how to counter it. Of course, you could taunt this thing, but you do have to get through sub. I think taunt goes through sub, almost guaranteed. But again, like once it has a sub up. Like this thing can still hit you with like a pretty strong flamethrower or a sludge bomb. And ultimately, I really like this mon. It's got some cool options too. Knockoff, Nasty Plot, as I said earlier. Thunderwave and Taunt are also really good. Toxic Spikes, I think I mentioned earlier as well. And then Will-O-Wisp too. Will-O-Wisp things. So you could even Will-O-Wisp like a potential wall that's trying to switch in on you. And even like with Nasty Plot, this thing can like destroy teams. But I really like this subset. I used this previously and I really love this set. So definitely a set to watch out for. Or an idea, like you don't have to bring it, but it's a cool set. But also don't expect it every week. You know what I mean? There's like it all depends on the matchup. Next up, we have Serena with Queenly Majesty. I honestly did not know this thing had this decent stats. It's honestly pretty solid. But of course, this thing is mostly running Rapid Spin, U-Turn. Definitely good for Switch Initiative. And then, of course, it's getting, like, what is it? High Jump Kick, Power Whip. Overall, just has decent moves. Taunt as well. Really loving all the Taunt mons because basically this allows you, if your opponent's trying to set up like spikes or stealth rocks, you have to be worried about this thing taunting you. Queenly Majesty is also a pretty unique ability. It allows you basically to not get swept by like priority moves too. So even like the worst case scenario, say like a random person has Dragonite, they're setting up Dragon Dances, you know, they need this E-Speed to connect, or like E-Speed is their only move, then this will protect you from those priority moves, and potentially you can get off a Play Rough, because I do think this, yeah, it does get Play Rough. So I definitely think this is actually a way more decent mon than people think, and it has a crazy high attack stat. Like you definitely run like Choice Band on this and do like a lot of damage as well. So definitely a really good Pokemon. I really like it. Alolan Persian, Technician, Fur Coat. So you could also run Fur Coat and it does double the defense, especially if you EV in it. It's probably not bad defensively. But Technician does allow you to boost up moves, Chilling Water, Aerial Lace, Fake Out, blah blah blah. It does get Nasty Plot as well. I mean, it's got decent special attack and it's pretty fast, but I don't think Nasty Plot is the way, but it's got good coverage. I mean, Power Gem, Shadow Ball, Taunt as well. Again, Switcheroo, so you could switch items, U-Turn. But my main thing of looking at this is like it's really fast. You can just run like these annoying Parting Shot, Thunder Wave, kind of taunt, kind of weird sets. But ultimately, like if you're not doing damage to something, you just Parting Shot out, reduce their attacks, and then you bring in like I said again, like Switch Initiative is super important. I mean, you could run Parting Shot, or if you really wanted to, you could do U-Turn just for the chip. Might be beneficial for you. Ultimately, I just really like this thing because it's extremely fast, and you can do like the shenanigans like this of just reducing stats or doing a little bit of chip, and then getting in whatever Pokemon that you really want. So next we have Electrode. I actually really like Electrode because if you weaken your opponent's ground types, not everyone has a great ground type. You can basically Volt Switch Thunderbolt on a lot of things. Of course, Electrode is a little bit weak in that it's most likely not going to kill things. But the main idea is that you're so fast that you can just keep Volt Switching out, and if you have enough sacks, you can just Volt Switch everything down, bring this back in, Thunderbolt something if you now put it in range. It also has backup Explosion, so in case, like, you know, say you Thunderbolt, they do bring in their ground type, but it's like, you know, I think that getting rid of this ground type is really important. You just explode on them. Taunt also really good. Getting Tera Blast as another special option, because I think besides electric moves, this gets like no coverage. So even having Tera Blast is honestly pretty decent. Just running it as a normal type move with special attack is not bad as well. And ultimately Taunt, it does get Light Screen and Reflect too. Overall, this Pokemon is super good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this squad. We'll probably move on to the next. I will say the one thing, that major thing that this squad is missing, but I think it will still definitely operate extremely well. It is missing like a bulky water. I don't really know how this really gets punished though, because like maybe you don't have like the greatest water resist, because Gudra and Serena also get hit with the Ice Beam. So as like the player for this team, Definitely watch out for water types that can also pack Ice Beam, because your water resist are these two mons that get hit with Ice Beam, and it's very common for water types to run Ice Beam, but still you can definitely work around that. So definitely dig in this squad. Let's move on to the next. All right, and we're back with the Sonoran Pikachus. So their squad is Samurott Hisui, Enamorous Therian, which is their Tera captain, and their Tera options for Enamorous are Fairy, Ground, and Steel. So Fairy obviously being a very good defensive typing, pretty much the best typing in the game, I think, honestly, defensively. Ground making you immune to electric type moves, and then Steel also extremely good typing defensively. It allows you to set up basically on mons that you normally wouldn't be able to set up on, but we'll talk about that in a little bit later of what setup options that guy has. Houndstone, Sableye, Dunsparce I feel like is super underrated pick. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because with Eviolite this thing is quite bulky. Reboot also as an NFE pretty strong with Libero, has definitely usable stats, and depending on the matchup, like it's pretty fast with 94 speed and has decent attack of 86 with Libero getting stab on everything. Definitely could be a mon to look out for. Hippowdon very good with Stealth Rock, of course. Electrode Hisui, new, extremely fast, and allows you to hit ground types with your grass typing. Rillaboom, Grassy Surge, Quaxwell, and Stonejourner. So, looking at the squad immediately, I'm thinking, who's your main way of getting rid of hazards? That's what I always kind of jump towards. But also, you have to think about, you don't necessarily always have to get rid of hazards as long as you have threats. So, on this squad, the only hazard removal, I believe, is Rapid Spin. I don't think anyone gets Defog. I don't think Enamorous gets Defog. Let's check that. Does not get Defog. Okay. So as I predicted, Quaxwell is the only Rapid Spinner for this team. And Quaxwell, honestly, it can, with an Eviolite, it can be pretty defensive. But I think over time, it also gets Roost, so it can have some survivability. But I feel like over time, it's not as bulky as you think. It can definitely last a couple hits, but more towards stronger geared threats, and might not be able to take them on as well, meaning your Rapid Spinner is getting dwindled. So what can you do in those scenarios? As a team, which I think is what this team is geared towards, you yourself want to set up spikes and basically abuse as many turns as you can when your opposing team is trying to set up on spikes on you. So looking at this team, Samurott Hisui with Ceaseless Edge, that is a signature dark move that's boosted by sharpness, basically allows you, as long as you hit it, allows you to get spikes on your enemy team. And definitely this team loves spikes, I feel like, because basically what this allows you to do is once you set up those spikes, you can come in with Electrode Hisui or Rillaboom, do a lot of damage, and then looking at its ghost types, basically Houndstone and Sableye are extremely good ghost types that basically prevent your opponent's rapid spin. So if you do set up a whole bunch of hazards, which you do have opportunities with Stealth Rock on Hippowdon, Dunsparce, and Stonejourner, and then you can set up spikes with Samurott Hisui, you can hazard stack a lot, and then when they do try to come in for rapid spin, you can easily go Houndstone or Sableye. Enamorous Therian also is like a very good setup mon. I think it can still do a lot of damage, honestly. It has 135 special attack, so you could also make this a bulky attacker. And once you set up those spikes, I think it also gets agility, although it is a little bit slow. Enamorous Therian can also just start taking a lot of hits and then destroying a lot of Pokemon. You also have Reboot as well. So basically, in this scenario, if you don't have a good Rapid Spinner, that means that you have to play more offensively, start hazard stacking, as well as trying to prevent your opponent from setting up hazards on you, which you do have 2 ghost types. So overall, I feel like even though it doesn't have a crazy Rapid Spinner, it's still not bad. As long as you play a little bit more offensively, it all depends on your playstyle. Overall, looking at the team, we see like slight weaknesses in ice, but overall it's not crazy. Although I think I don't know of any prevalent strong ice types. I don't think anyone drafted Bax. If someone drafted Bax, this would be, or Bax Caliber would be a little bit more scary, as well as having a fairy weakness. I feel like the like worst thing about this team is that it doesn't have good fairy resist. Definitely Reboot cannot be your fairy resist, and having a squad without a fairy resist can be detrimental depending on like what your opponent has. But of course you do have Enamorous Therian, which you can turn into a steel type, which allows you to resist those fairy type moves, but that does mean that you're going to have to bring it each week if your opponent has a strong fairy type. So overall, it's still definitely playable. I wouldn't stress too much. This squad is definitely useful and definitely good. Again, this like whole little document is not everything, but just going over like minor details of what I like in a draft. Again, I'm not a perfect player at all, but I do like good rapid spinners, and if I was opposing this team, my main goal would be to try to get rid of your rapid spinner so I could set up spikes and stealth rocks. So going into the individual members of your team, Samurai Hisui has this new ability, Sharpness. Basically makes all the cutting moves super broken, which Ceaseless Edge is powered up. Razor Shell is. There's also a couple other ones. Then it also gets Knockoff as well as Sucker Punch. So if this thing is going down, it can still Sucker Punch you in the end. And overall decent stats to support this kind of build. But also like overall decent stats where you can do several different things with this. So I am excited to see what they can do with it. Next, Enamorous Therian. This thing just has amazing stats. I mean, bad speed, but everything else is super good. Overcoat basically makes you immune to Sandstorm as well as Spore. Pretty sure those are the most important ones. As well as it gets access to Calm Mind, Iron Defense. And looking at these stats, like you're not going to one-shot this thing, making this Terra type. Basically, this thing can gear whatever it needs to gear into to prevent whatever Pokemon is in front of it to doing massive damage to it. And then it can Calm Mind set up on you or Iron Defense and then Draining Kiss your whole team and basically like win games. It also has good coverage, Moonblast, Mystical Fire, Psychic, Sludge Bomb, Super Substitute. Like you can also just run like a bulky offensive set, and this mon is super strong. It also has Taunt as well, and as well as it would get its Terra Blast options. And ultimately this thing is just really strong in terms of a Terra type. As I said before, like some teams struggle with good fairy types. This is a good fairy type. You could just run offensive and then do Terra Fairy, and you'd be doing a hell of a lot of damage with Fairy Moonblast. So something to be careful of for sure, because this Enamorous is very powerful. Next we have Houndstone. So Last Respects is banned on this guy. So it's kind of interesting of like, what do you see as uses for this? Well, currently this thing with Fluffy, you could also find some niche tech where Sand Rush is actually useful against your team. They do have Hippowdon for it, so it's actually super strong. If you find the right, it all depends on the matchup, but you can still sweep your opponent with a good Sand Rush. Of course, you don't have Last Respects. You're going to be more reliant on what is it, Phantom Force, which is of course a 2-turn move, unfortunately, but you also have decent moves of Stomping Tantrum, the Ice Fang, Fire Fang, Crunch. Ultimately not bad moves. But more importantly, this thing definitely wants to be defensive, because with Fluffy, increasing this defense stat makes you super bulky on the defensive side, and then makes your body press do a hell of a lot of damage. You also can Will-O-Wisp things. You also have Destiny Bond and Disable. Ultimately, this thing can be really bulky. You also have Roar to force things out. This thing is definitely going to end up being more on the bulkier side, but can handle a lot of threats, because the Ghost typing is actually not bad defensively. It's actually pretty good. So moving forward, we have Sableye, which has Knockoff, Thunder Wave, Will-O-Wisp. These are just two moves that I kind of chose because obviously it does have Prankster, but there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Sableye. Encore, doing a whole bunch of kind of gimmicky stuff. It also still gets Recover, Sucker Punch, Shadow Sneak, Trick, also really cool. But ultimately this thing is like not like a gimmick mon, but basically it can take on like one or two of your mons depending on how you're playing. And it can, like with this typing, I mean, it's only weak to Fairy, so also gives you normal and fighting immunity as well as a psychic immunity, which can be really good to switch around into. So overall I do like Sableye. You can just run bulky depending on the matchup, and ultimately you can take on a lot of threats with this thing. Next, I love me some Dunsparce. I think the Dunsparce is also extremely strong, but Dunsparce with Eviolite, Serene Grace I feel like is also extremely strong, because I think with these defenses, max HP defense and max defense, I think you might be stronger defensively than normal to Dunsparce. But basically why this Pokemon is so good is because of Serene Grace. Rattled can also be good in certain cases, but Serene Grace, Body Slam, basically giving you a 60% chance to paralyze, I believe it is, right? Because it's doubled, so 30% would be 60%, as well as it does get access to Coil. It also gets Roost, it has Stealth Rocks, Set Up Rocks, and it also has Air Slash, so you could run this thing like specially with Air Slash and do a lot of damage. It also gets Glare, Hyper Voice, Poison Jab. Like, this thing can actually do a decent amount of damage, because you have to think, like, Dunsparce was a Pokemon before it did Dunsparce, so it doesn't have a crazy high attack stat, but still. You can even run like Facade for when things want to like toxic you or prevent you from setting up, and then you just Facade them, do crazy amounts of damage. Ultimately, I really liked Dunsparce. Next, we have Reboot. As I said earlier, this thing can still be a threat with decent speed, decent attack, especially with Libero getting stab on all of its moves. I know it's like heavily nerfed, only once per switching, but still can do a lot of damage with High Jump Kick, Flare Blade, Skunk Shot, U-Turn. Has also a lot of other cool coverage moves, Sucker Punch, Trailblaze. I guess you could even run Tera Blast if that's something that you like, but there's a lot of cool moves. But it does not get Pirate Ball, of course. That's the one downside of it not being the Cinderace. Next, we have Apollon, obviously super bulky, HP, attack, defense, Stealth Rock, Slack Off is just a classic. This thing also gets Whirlwind, it's Fire Fang, Yawn as well. Just a very good supportive Pokemon and can take on a lot of threats. Also has Body Press, which I didn't know, but definitely useful and strong. Yeah, I really like Hippo. Can also be good for setting up the sand for Houndstone, as I said earlier. Electrode, Hisui, very similar to the last team of Electrode, but this one is way better because you do have grass typing. You get Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Chloroblast, which is really high base power, but you do lose 50% of your HP. But ultimately, like in some matchups, you're just doing that amount of damage and it doesn't really matter. Your abilities, Static and Aftermath, not great abilities, but Aftermath, like say if they're gonna priority kill you, you can still do that 1/4 of a chip and kill them as well. Does have access to Leech Seed, Explosion, Giga Drain, Leaf Storm, definitely a lot better than the other Electrode. Thunder Wave as well, but definitely dependent on the matchup. So if you can weaken, like the thing is about this Pokemon is like it can take on whatever ground type you're switching in on electric types most of the time. So it's actually extremely strong, and you can even run like Leech Seed sub on this and it's also super strong. Next, Rillaboom. I really love Rillaboom, although it did lose Grassy Glide. Some moves to look out for: U-Turn, Bulk Up, Swords Dance, Wood Hammer. Has some really cool unique moves: Acrobatics, Drum Beating being a signature one, Drain Punch, Earthquake. This thing gets a lot of good coverage. Knockoff, Leech Seed, Sub, Taunt, just super good Pokemon, and it's like you can do a lot of things with this high of HP, this high attack. You can run Band. There's a lot of options for this Pokemon, and I really like it. Next, we have Quaxwell. As I said previously, this is mostly going to be a Rapid Spinner with Evolite, Roost, and then most likely some water type move. Although Baton Pass is kind of nice because you do get some switch initiative there. But ultimately, it's probably going to be running an Evolite and doing some type of unique spread with that. Next, Stonejourner. I never really used this Pokemon before, but I was looking into its thing. It obviously can Stealth Rock and has very good stats on the defensive, attack, and HP side. You might be able to run like decent speed. You might be able to run like a Rock Polish set and potentially sweep someone with Earthquake, Stone Edge, and like maybe Heavy Slam or something like that. Definitely a really cool Pokemon. Just definitely dependent on the matchup. So I think that is going to be it for this squad. I don't think there's any major problems with this. I think also this guy also, sorry, not guy, I don't know them, but this person also doesn't have a crazy bulky water, although Samurai Hisui could be EV'd into it. But honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think this team might want to be more on the offensive side, but we'll see. Definitely excited to see how this team will perform. Alright, next we have the Ottawa Donphans, who have Kingambit, disgusting, Donphan, Arcanine, Lurantis, Dedenne, very cool, Stantler, Mimikyu, Vaporeon, Medicham, Rotom Frost, and Greedent. Overall, this team looks like a threat. Anytime you see Kingambit, you know that thing's going to put in some offensive work. Donphan is a fantastic spinner, also gets Stealth Rocks. Arcanine good defensively as well as can be offensive. Lurantis I felt like was a really cool pick. I think with Contrary it does get Leaf Storm. I don't know if any other moves it benefits from that, but also you can't intimidate it because also that would increase its attack as well. So potentially you could run that route as well. Dedenne, I am very curious about what happens because I have no idea about what Dedenne does, but I am hoping for some cool stuff this season. Stantler with Eviolite also has really great abilities. Mimikyu is their Tera captain, and their Tera options are Fairy, Fire, and Steel. So Fairy, obviously extremely good typing, and you can also boost your Fairy type moves, as well as Fire prevents you from getting Will-O-Wisp and allows you to hit Steel types, which Mimikyu normally can't, although I think it does get Drain Punch, so it depends on the Steel type. And then Steel typing also can help you be more defensive to allow you to Swords Dance up on certain mons. Vaporeon, this is just bulky Wish garbage, and I hate it, and never want to see this again after last season. Medicham with Pure Power is actually extremely strong. This mon cannot be slept on, because even though it is like, what, 60 based attack, Pure Power, that's doubled, you know what I mean? Have to be careful about that. Rotom Frost and an excellent electric type, as well as getting an ice type to hit those ground types, although you do have to land blizzards. And Greedent, overall, I just love me some normal types. Looking at the squad, I don't think there's anything too wrong. I mean, the most important thing that they have is Good Spinner and Donphan. I actually checked Lurantis also gets Defog. I was very surprised about. But yeah, I guess that's a thing. Bulky Water, very important. I think in terms of Fairy type, taking Fairy type hits, I mean, it's not every day that you can take a Fairy type hit. But of course, Mimikyu does have access to Tera Steel, so it can resist in that way. As well as Arcanine is not like a terrible Fairy resist either. Like it has really good stats for it. So I think also might be a problem with this squad, as I feel like, I mean, it does have Volt Switch and U-Turn with Dedenne, but I feel like sometimes it is on the bulkier side, so I think it actually could work well. But I think sometimes you're going to be a little bit nervous about having some initiative. Basically, how can I get my King Gambit in safely to start setting up, basically? Or how can I get in one of my, like, Medicham or Rotom Frost to do a lot of damage? I think that's what this team is going to struggle with a little bit, but overall it's a really solid team. And again, like, you can find ways around that. You can definitely either sack them on, or you have defensive options to switch around. You switch into your defensive option, they switch into theirs, you catch their double, and you go back into your threat. And this team can definitely window down a team. I'm rocking with it. I will say a little bit of a ground type weakness being Lurantis. Have to be careful of like Mold Breaker mons for Rotom, but it's still not bad for ground. Again, this is best of one. You can find a whole bunch of ways. This document isn't everything. You can find a whole bunch of ways to like beat your opponent, even though you have like whatever weaknesses this show. Like, it's really not that important. It's what I'm getting at. As long as you find a way to match up, like, you're gonna, no matter what team you draft, you're always gonna find that your opponent has a team, like, has one specific Pokemon that like destroys your whole team. You just have to work around that. There's no perfect draft where you eliminate like all threats against your team. Okay, so let's go into the nitty gritty. King Gambit, disgusting mon. If you haven't seen this mon before, very good HP, attack, and defense, with Defiant as one of its abilities, as well as Supreme Overlord is extremely strong, giving more power. You basically get a free choice band if this is your last Pokemon left. Also gets access to Swords Dance as well as Sucker Punch, so this thing can sweep you, but also gets access to Stealth Rock, and Katal Cleave is its main dark type threat, and also gets Iron Head, Iron Defense, Poison Jab for your fairy types, although it's already running Steel, so why would you do that? Stone Edge, X Scissors, Zenheba, a little bit of coverage there. Overall, extremely good Pokemon, and you have to be careful about this guy. Next we have Donphan with Sturdy and Stealth Rock. Rapid Spin knockoff, also a good mon that gets Ice Spinner. Of course, it's more likely to run Earthquake or Gunk Shot or whatever. I see this thing being more defensive, but I mean, honestly, it has a move pool to be offensive and also a really good attack stat. Sturdy is a super good ability because it guarantees you to live at least one hit, which if you have leftovers, sometimes you can just leftovers back up to gain back your Sturdy. It's definitely a really good mon. Next we have Arcanine. I was looking at this thing more defensively. Intimidate's really good and has the bulk for Intimidate, Will-O-Wisp, Extreme Speed, Morning Sun, but also gets crazy good coverage, Close Combat, Crunch, blah blah blah, Flamethrower, Iron Head, Play Rough, Outrage, Psychic Fangs, Wild Charge. Gets crazy coverage, so you could definitely run this thing offensively or mix set, and it can still do a lot of damage. Lurantis, as I said before, gets access to defog, but maybe you can set up some Leaf Storms with Contrary and start putting work into your opponent, like you run like a bulky set with max HP, max special attack, and start throwing some Leaf Storms at them, or you Swords Dance up and potentially you can Trailblaze and have the coverage that you need to knock out your opponent. This thing can also be a decent defogger if you really need it to. It also gets access to Synthesis. It's definitely not bad, and I am excited to hopefully see this in the future game. But of course, the main thing about Draftlings is you want to bring fun stuff, but you also want to win. So there's always that balance of I want to have fun, but I also want to win this match. So I am excited to see Lurantis and what it does, but I am hoping that it at least works. Now here is Dedenne. I have never used this Pokemon before. I've really never seen it. I know it has Cheek Pouch, which is pretty unique, but I'm very excited to see what this thing does because I've really never seen it been used before. I mean, it's Grass Knot, Super Fang, it has a bunch of utility, Volt Switch as well. Draining Kiss, I think it also gets access to screens, Light Screen, I assume Reflect somewhere. Wait, does it seriously not get Reflect? Wait, but it gets Light Screen? That's so dumb. Thunder Wave, I don't know, I've never really seen this Pokemon in action, but it looks like it can be fast and it can do some damage. So I am curious to see what this Pokemon does. No shade towards Dedenne at all, because he might just nuzzle your team down. So next we have Stantler, Eviolite, Intimidate. Again, as I said before, whatever matchup you have, these abilities can be amazing. Intimidate to drop your opposed attack, Frisk to see what your opponent has an item, or Sap Stepper so you have a grass immunity. With Eviolite, you're pretty bulky, especially if you're max HP and whatever defense that you need for that matchup, as well as you still get Psy Shield Bash, which is Weirdeer's signature move. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but having the 100% chance to raise your defense can basically allow you to get enough defense boost to win teams, but you don't have any leftovers recovery because you're running Eviolite, so you have to be careful. It's obviously a balance. You can't just spam Psy Shield Bash and then expect oh, I'm just winning now. You're most likely getting dwindled down while you're spamming Bash, and then your opponent's going to send out a special attacker, and it's definitely can be scary. This mon also gets access to Thunder Wave, which is going to be really annoying, as well as Calm Mind, so potentially it can set up with Calm Mind and Sweep as well. Also gets Screens, Shadow Ball, Stored Power, which would be really cool, especially with Calm Mind. But overall, I think this Pokemon is really underrated. Decent speeds here as well. Basically can outspeed other walls. And I think this mon can definitely put into work depending on the matchup. Disable. It's a cool mon. I like it. I'm biased. So next we have Mimikyu. Of course, this thing is a beast. Comes with a freaking substitute. You know what I mean? Substitute that only takes 1/8 of your HP. You can easily just Swords Dance on something. Shadow Sneak for priority, Shadow Claw, you also get Play Rough, but you can also run a bulkier set with either Bulk Up or as well bring Will-O-Wisp. You also get Destiny Bond, Drain Punch, really useful for getting back health. I guess you also get Leech Life too. So for example, say you can't kill something, but at least you have a Swords Dance up, you can Drain Punch something down. Thunder Wave, as well as it gets Trick Room, Wood Hammer. This thing is just a beast and literally so annoying to deal with, especially with the Tera types that it has. It's going to be a problem to deal with because you think you will list this thing and then boom, it's Terrifier. Brutal. So next we have Vaporeon. This thing last season was so freaking annoying. Baton Pass, Wish Protect, just like Sylveon earlier, but this thing I feel does it so well. That you can just be defensive. It has really high HP. You can do defensive or especially defensive, and just sits there, takes hits, and then you can Wish Baton Pass up your buddies. So definitely with leftovers, this thing is super strong and hard to deal with. You definitely want to run Taunt for this, or have I think even if you have an offensive way of dealing with this, a Stab Thunderbolt is not going to one-shot this thing. It's guaranteed to two-shot. You're never one-shotting this thing. So you either have to have a very strong way of dealing with this, or you have to have Taunt. So yeah, that is Vaporeon. Next, Medicham, as I said earlier, this thing is a beast with Pure Power, Bullet Punch for some priority, Close Combat, Zen Headbutt, Ice Punch, also gets Fire Punch, gets some really good coverage moves, Poison Jab, also gets Recover, Reflect, Rock Slide. It just has good overall coverage and can end up winning teams, especially if you have Trailblaze to like increase your speed and you just start doing tons of damage. So really like Metagem. Rotom Frost, Levitate, extremely good stats. Although the typing Ice is not great. Ice has, I think, the most weaknesses. But you do get rid of Levitate, your ground weakness, for some mons. Volt Switch, Blizzard, Thunderwave, Will-O-Wisp I felt were like the most optimal threats, but also you have to be careful, like Blizzard is only 70% and it is your only ice type move, which is really unfortunate. So that's like the only downside of Rotom Frost. Overall, definitely a good mon though. Just hit your blizzards, that's all. No big deal. Then we have Greedent. I really freaking like Greedent. It has really high HP and you can EV it around to do defense, special attack, or even attack things. Like you make this thing a bolt key attacker because it does get Swords Dance. But from my idea, Cheek Pouch, run like Citrus Berry or something. Or maybe not. Wait, so I don't know how Stuffed Cheeks works. I don't know what would be the best ability. Stuffed Cheeks, eat your berry, get +2 defense, and then spam body press. Very, very strong. But also you could Sword Stance into Body Slam, Earthquake, Facade, even if something tries to burn you to take you down. Super Fang also really useful as a, like, if you can't hit something, you can at least do half to it. And definitely I really like this mon actually. And only I mean, normal takes neutral from everything, but it only has one weakness in fighting, and this thing definitely has some good stats to withstand hits, so I really like Greedent. And yeah, I think that is it for the Ottawa Donphans. Ultimately, I'm really excited to see what some of these Pokemon that I've never seen before, but this team is a threat for sure. So let's hop into the next team. Next, we have the Mojave Cacturnes. Oh, I do apologize. These teras are off. The tera is here as well as here. But looking at their team, they have an Amoonguss, Cresselia, Dachshund, Magneton, Carbink, Morgrem, Zora Kasui, Fortress, Wishcash, Cacturne, and a Braixen. So looking at the squad, very, very defensively orientated. You have Amoonguss, Cresselia, very bulky mons. Dachshund allows you to wish, and I think it gets Baton Pass. I'll double check that. Wish Protect, Magneton allowing you to magnet pull and trap other steel types. So that is one way that this team can eliminate other attackers. Carbink to set up Stealth Rocks. Morgrem with Eviolite Prankster can definitely set up screens for you. Zora Kasui is definitely one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. Can result in a lot of questionable, like, makes your opponent definitely think a lot, you know what I mean? They don't know what you have in. Could potentially allow you to nasty plot up for a turn and then potentially sweep their team, or just get off a lot of damage on something. Of course, you do have to play around it. Of course, like, I saw like a video of basically like a mon that normally does not get hit with Stealth Rocks, got hit with Stealth Rocks because it was Zora Kasui. So you do have to be careful in those like niche scenarios of like how much rock damage you're taking, blah blah blah. But overall, Zora Kasui is super strong. Fortress, excellent way of setting up Stealth Rocks, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, whatever you need. Wishcash can be a really cool water and ground type. Can also set up use Stealth Rocks and also has access to Dragon Dance. Cacturne, Water Absorb, can be a very good Sucker Punch user with Swords Dance and can do a lot of damage, although it's not that bulky, but also gets Toxic Spikes as well. And then we have Braixen, which I thought was a little bit questionable, just because I've never seen this Pokemon before, but I think it's actually a really cool tech, and we'll talk about it in a second. Overall, I mean, look at this team really has like no weaknesses. Major ground, I mean, bro, Cresselia is taking nothing, you know what I mean? I mean, Cresselia having Levitate, like this team is like overall solid, but it's also like the most defensive team possible. But Amoonguss does have Toxic. Like, I feel like this team has a lot of ways of dwindling your team down without you knowing. Like, this is like extremely bulky stuff that your opponent has to break through, but they can kind of hold on pretty snug here. I do like that they are Tera Magneton, so their Tera types, excuse me, are electric and ground. So ground does allow them to magnet pull in other steel types and hit them super effectively. I also like that they went with the Magneton pick while also having Fortress, because Fortress is like one of the mons that you don't want to get trapped. So having that on your team really benefits Magneton. It really benefits Fortress. And then Cacturne is also grass and fighting. Grass to boost the grass type moves, and fighting can also boost its Drain Punch ability. So looking at this team, I think I really like the way that they went for option 2 for their Tera types of choosing 2 Tera captains with 2 Tera types. I think it's definitely better than going with their other one. I think they could only do maybe Fortress, Whiscash, Cresselia, maybe Dachshund as like their other options. I definitely don't think those work, so I think the Cacturne and Magneton was absolutely the best play. And I think this team is actually super solid. You do have to be careful. I think the best way to play this team, set up spikes. I mean, you have so many good Stealth Rock users, spikes, blah, 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 and basically get your opponent, like set up spikes, blah, 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 then bring in your walls on stuff where it can't be, like, they can't take any damage, and then cause your opponent to keep switching around you to try to break your walls, but ultimately, like, your walls aren't getting broken because you have Dachshund wishing into other stuff, and this team is definitely deadly, so I definitely like the squad. Going into the nitty gritty, first of all, Amoonguss. If you have not seen Amoonguss, it's annoying. Regenerator, Toxic, Clear Smog can also prevent your setup, and it can Spore something to sleep. One of the very limited Pokemon with Spore, and it's very, very strong. I don't think there's really much to be said here, although like it literally just take hits, Toxics your whole team, and can be really hard to deal with. Next, Cresselia. This thing has amazing HP, defense, and special defense. You have to be super careful about this thing. Just Calm Mining can end up honestly just sweeping your team by just setting up a couple Calm Mines, and then you have no way of dealing with it. It also gets Moonlight as recovery. Excuse me. Moonlight. Lunar Dance can also be a really good way of, if this thing is about to die, you Lunar Dance up, and then you can get a new Pokemon in with full HP and PP. Thunder Wave, really good for weakening your opponents, as well as I said before, Calm Mind sets with this thing can be deadly. Has a really great ability of Levitate as well. Can also set up screens for you or Trick Room, and this team can honestly work pretty well under Trick Room. I think overall, if you want to use Cacturne, I think Trick Room is really solid. Moving forward, Dachshund, Well-Baked Body prevents you. Pokemon defense is raised by 2 if hit by a fire move, and you get the immunity. Oh, that's such a good move. Yeah, as I said before, Wish, Baton Pass, Protect. I think I said it's like, does this thing have Baton Pass? But also Body Press, Draining Kiss to gain back some recovery. Yawn as well. I really like this Pokemon. It's very good defensively. And of course, it's not really doing much damage to your opponent, but if you can Toxic stuff with Amoonguss or set up Toxic Spikes and just dwindle your opponent's team down, this thing also gets Roar. This thing can like definitely wall a ton of Pokemon. Next we have Magneton. This thing doesn't even need to run Eviolite to be good. You can run Specs. It's got decent enough spats for it, or Choice Scarf. Volt Switch, Flash Cannon are pretty standard, but of course this thing can tear ground for your ground types and trap them in with Magnet Pull, so you definitely have to be scared of that. As well as Analytic can be really powerful if you were to run a Trick Room team. Wait, no, I don't think Analytic accounts for Trick Room, right? Yeah, it's move and a turn, so it wouldn't work for Trick Room, but still, this thing is pretty good under Trick Room as well. Thunderbolt, Steel Beam, just able to do a lot of damage, and it can explode on you, so that's pretty epic. Next, we have Carbink with Sturdy, Stealth Rock, Spikes, Calm Mind, Trick Room with amazing defensive ability. This also can be a really great Trick Room mon. Can also set up Calm Mind. I thought it was going to get Explosion too, but it looks like it does not. Also gets access to Body Press, screens as well. Definitely a mon that can set up Stealth Rocks and Spikes, and then maybe even Trick Room, and then allow something to sweep. Next we have Morgrim, Eviolite. I mean, this is just baby Grimmsnarl, so Reflect, Light Screen, Thunder Wave. It does have decent special attack. I wonder if that's actually usable for something, but I would love to see if it is. It also has Parting Shot, which is really good for Prankster as well to give you initiative. As I said before, of getting in, like, you know, this is a great way of, like, you set up screens. If your opponent's trying to bring in something to, like, you know, set up or whatever, you can just Parting Shot it out into a wall to stop it. You can also trick, so maybe you could just like trick a Choice Scarf onto something and it'd be really strong as well. Although if you are trick, you do not have decent bulk, so that is kind of the balance between that. Zoroark, of course, as I talked before, with Illusion, extremely strong. Nasty Plot, Hyper Voice, Shadow Ball. Coverage is really strong. Also gets some other moves, Extrasensory, Flamethrower, Grass Knot, Psychic. Wow, it gets Psychic, that's crazy. Sludge Bomb, and Tera Blast is not better than Hyper Force, right? Yeah, it's not. But it also gets U-Turn, which is really good as well. So extremely strong Mon and has a lot of potential. Does it still get Sucker? It does not. Okay. A lot of potential here. Fortress, Sturdy. Overcoat can also be useful in certain times, but mostly you're running Sturdy. This thing is amazing for setting up hazards, as well as a really strong Rapid Spinner. Duck Spikes, Stealth Rock, as well as it gets Explosion. So if you set up all your hazards, you just explode turn 1, then you get into your Sweeper or whatever you want. So this mon I really like. It also has Volt Switch, and if you want some Switch Initiative as well as Thunder Wave can be really annoying. I think I also forgot to discuss options for like defog and stuff. Of course, Fortress is like the only spinner here, but Fortress is not a bad spinner as long as you keep it healthy, which I think with this team you definitely can, as well as Fortress with Volt Switch can get out of scenarios that it doesn't want to be in. So I really like Fortress. Wishcash, with its Oblivious ability, allows it to be immune to Intimidate, can be very useful for Dragon Dance variants. Overall has really good HP, really good typing, only being weak to ground. Or, sorry, not ground, grass. So this thing can definitely set up on you and potentially sweep you. Gets access to Stealth Rock, so it can be a really interesting Stealth Rock user, as well as it does get spikes. What the hell? This thing gets spikes? Oh, hell no, this thing is actually really good. But yeah, Dragon Dance Sense can also be a thing for this. Cacturne, as their other Tera Captain, Grass, and Fighting. Again, can boost the Drain Punch, or you can run this specially. I was thinking this strictly physically, but does it get Nasty Plot? It does. So this thing can be physical or special. I think physical is a little bit better because it doesn't rely on Trick Room as long as you have Sucker Punch, but also if you do have Trick Room up, you can easily run special moves and potentially sweep teams. But of course, this thing is not bulky at all, so you do have to find a rare opportunity to set up. Also gets access to Leech Seed, but again, I don't think you're really wanting to do that. This thing gets spikes too? What the hell? Why is everything getting spikes? This thing is deadly. Taunt being really good. Spiky Shield I don't think is that useful, but gets good coverage and Poison Jab. I think there was one other move that I was looking at. No. Or I guess, yeah, Thunder Punch, Zen Headbutt. Very good moves, as well as it gets Water Absorb. Sandville, not that crazy, but Water Absorb, definitely good to have an immunity. And then finally, Breaksin. Now, we were all wondering, what does Breaksin do? I think the coolest way to run this thing is with Magician stealing people's items. So, I think this is how it works. Don't quote me, I know for certain items this is not how it works. Like, I think if you run like a gem, it does not work like this. But when I googled it, it said that Power Herb works like this, so I assume this is the right way it goes. Okay, Breaksin, Magician. Wait, no, this wouldn't work for Power Herb, right? I don't think it does. Ooh, but you can run Solar Beam. Okay, here's the tech. I don't think White Herb works because I think it has to activate before it goes off. So it has to be Power Herb. Okay. You could find other moves I think that dissipate. Like maybe like Red Card? I don't know. Someone else is gonna have to think this up for me. I know for a fact this Power Herb works, so let's talk about this. Power Herb Magician breaks in, goes for a Solar Beam, you switch it, so say you think breaks in is walled by water types, boom, it's not. Power Herb, Solar Beam, it's hit with your Solar Beam, and then Magician, because your Power Herb went off, you take their item, which for a lot of Pokemon can be extremely strong to take someone's item away, and also gives you a lot of knowledge as well. This thing also gets Will-O-Wisp, Flamethrower, gets some good coverage removing, Grass Knot, Psychic, Tera Blast, Trick Room, another Trick Room user, as well as it gets Swish. That's very surprising, but decent special attack as well. So this thing could definitely do some damage, but overall, it is like, I don't think it's a great use of Eviolite. I think it's okay. Maybe you could run Eviolite Calm Mind. It could definitely take on some special hits, especially with Wish. Wait, Wish Calm Mind? Might be the tech, but overall I am excited to see what this thing can do, because I think it does have some uses. I really do. I think it could be strong depending on the matchup. But yeah, without further ado, that is the Mojave Cacturnes. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, and next we have Marble Falls Miniors. Now, I will say I think this is potentially the strongest or one of the strongest teams of the draft on the Kalos Division, because looking at this team, I do not want to play against this team. Someone was telling me, I'm pretty sure it was Wichita Weavels, he said, Glacier is not that good, it's only good under Trick Room. And boy, does this look like a Trick Room team, as well as just a ton of Switch initiative. So their squad consists of Slowking Galar, Tornadus Therian, Cyclizar, Electros, Phalanx, Quilladin as their NFE, very good at NFE, Glacier, Ursaluna, Klefki, Wugtrio, and Lycanroc Midnight. Of course, their only Stealth Rocker is Lycanroc Midnight. I will say that is one downside of this team, but it does have good spikers in Klefki and Quilladin. Toxic Spike's also on Slowking, as well as it has extremely good Switch initiative. I think, yeah, Cyclizar gets U-turn, Tornadus T gets U-turn, Electros gets Volt Switch and U-turn. Ultimately, if you're not running Trick Room, this allows you to get Switch initiative into your huge threats, which is Glacier and Ursaluna, as well as Slowking can Chilly Reception into one of your big threats as well. Especially the way snow works in this game is I'm pretty sure you Chilly Reception Hail in a Glacier, and Glacier gets a 1.5 defense boost because of the Hail and it being ice typing. Glacier is also their Tera type for their squad, and their Tera types for Glacier, of course, first one has to be your, one of your stabs. So they are Ice, Ghost, and Electric, and I think these types are amazing because Ghost does allow you to basically get rid of your fighting type weakness, and I think Electric is purposely there for the bulky waters. I think ultimately this person, Marble Falls Minior, chef kiss to you, my friend, because this team is extremely deadly. I think Cyclizar also is a rapid spinner, of course. Signature move, I think it's Shed Tail, is not allowed, but I think it's still very good, and it's a little bit underrated because it's got extremely fast speed, also has rapid spin, and can U-turn out. Gets Ice Tail or Ice Spinner as well, and he also has a couple knockoff options, so Cyclizar, Tornadus, and Electros, and I think this team is just really solid. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So Slowking Galar, Regenerator, as you know, this thing is super annoying. Trick Room, so what I envision of this Marble Falls Minior doing in the game is potentially just straight up Trick Rooming into Chilly Reception, and the fact that Slowking basically never dies to anything, you can set up a Trick Room comfortably, Chilly Reception into one of your big threats, either Glacier or Ursaluna, threaten things out. You can even Swords Dance up if you want to. Ursaluna also gets Swords Dance or Bulk Up, and just really start like wreaking havoc. But ultimately, if you still wanted to just not go that route, you can still run Toxic Spikes, Calm Mind, Drain Punch, Earthquake, Eerie Spell. I think is really cool to remove low PP moves. Gunk Shot, Ice Beam, Coverage, Nasty Plot, Power Jump. Like, this thing gets insane coverage, still gets Slack Off, Thunder Wave. This mon is just insane, and you have to respect that it's an OU because it's Chilly Reception is also just an amazing move, especially the snow setting up for Glacier. It's super strong. Next we have Tornadus, also another Regenerator mon. As you can see, 3 Regenerator mons with Cyclizar. This is disgusting because Chilly Reception, U-turn, and U-turn. This thing gets U-turn too, so you have like 3 mons that all can get Switch initiative and Regenerator back up. This team, I'm telling you, this team is deadly. U-turn, Heat Wave, Taunt, Nasty Plot for Tornadus T. It also got Bleak Wind Storm, which is a slightly, I mean, you could argue whether it's a better Hurricane or not. I mean, you get 10% accuracy, but you drop 10% damage. I would personally run it over Hurricane because I don't like Hurricane, but this thing also gets Sludge Bomb, Psychic, Grass Knot. It has decent coverage as well as Focus Blast. And this thing is very fast. It can also run bulky options, of course. Assault Vest, it did lose knockoff, I believe. So that is like the one downfall of this mon, but still this mon is extremely good and can spam flying type moves. Next we have Cyclizar, Regenerator, Dragon Normal, love the typing, extremely fast of 121. Gets rapid spin, of course. You can run some mix variants where you Draco Meteor and then run physical type moves, because it does get knockoff, Dragon Claw, Fire Fang, Ice Spinner, Iron Head, Power Whip. Like, the coverage on this thing is absolutely insane. As I said earlier, it gets U-turn, shift gear, giving you +2 speed and attack. Of course, the speed is kind of useless. I guess you could run a variant where you run no speed. But yeah, this thing I just think is really, really cool, and I think it's a little bit underrated. I think it will probably have to run like more offensive natured stuff because it doesn't have great defensive options. But we will see. Next, Electros, Levitate. I mean, I feel like if you don't know about Electros, this thing basically never dies and does hella damage. Volt Switch, Flamethrower, Giga Drain, and Drain Punch. I mean, look at that nasty coverage. Also gets close combat. Crunch, Coil is also a really cool set idea. Fire Punch, apparently it gets Light Screen too. Rock Slide, Stopping. Like, why is it getting these moves is what I'm saying. Like, this thing is just absolutely disgusting, and basically can live a whole bunch of hits, especially with Levitate. No weaknesses, you are taking a lot of neutral hits. But seriously, Electric is not bad defensive typing. Really, really useful. Next, we have Phalanx. Of course, this thing has Defiant and the No Retreat signature move that gives you them +1 Omni boost. And with these stats, it's honestly pretty usable. Like, I honestly thought, like, there are potential, obviously if you use this move you get trapped in, but there are ways for you potentially no retreat into an additional no retreat and then just sweep teams. But other options could be bulk up, because you do have decent defense, as well as Swords Dance and maybe like a Trailblaze option. Just run close combat. You can also do First Impression, Poison Jab, Rock Slides, and Headbutt. Definitely have some options here for coverage, and I think this thing actually has some good potential to sweep. Next, we have Quilladin as the NFE. Now, I do think I think Wichita also drafted this from the Unova side, and I think this does have a lot of potential to be one of the strongest NFEs, simply because Bulletproof allows you to really counter niche stuff, as well as it has really good defense already. It doesn't have great HP though, but I think this thing can stay alive long enough to do what it needs to do. Also gets Pain Split, Leech Seed, and Spikes. I don't know, I feel like this thing niche can take on, like, probably can take on, like, Goldingo on its own. I'm not exactly sure. Because I'm not, like, looking at the stats itself, but you also have Synthesis as well. And I think basically this thing can set up spikes and potentially live hits, is basically what I'm getting at. So I do like Quilladin a lot, especially as just, like, a way of setting up spikes and can be slightly wally. Moving on to the threat itself. Glacier, look at these stats: 100 HP, 145 attack and defense and special. This is so disgusting. So even if you weren't running like Trick Room, like Ice of course is terrible as a weakness, but if you Tera it, like, it's really, really strong. Because you're basically getting rid of all those weaknesses and you're allowed to live more hits and deal more damage. So you can easily run like a Swords Dance set on this, but if you're running Trick Room, but if you're not running Trick Room, you can obviously run Avalanche. You can just get a stronger Ice set move. Wow, this music is like really popping off right now, right? Dang, it might just be loud for me. Also has Iron Defense, Substitute, Taunt, Heavy Slam also does a lot of damage because of this mon is heavy. Body Press can also be really strong. Under Trick Room, I think this thing can be a monster. Of course, its ability, if it knocks out a Pokemon, it gets a +1 attack boost. Under Trick Room, if this thing starts rolling, it's really gonna just absolutely destroy teams. Next, we have Ursaluna. Of course, it has signature Flame Orb. Just Flame Orb, Guts, Facade, and Trick Room. Like, not a lot of Pokemon are running this. You also run Headlong Rush if you really need more damage compared to Earthquake, but I think Earthquake is probably fine. You also have Swords Dance, you have bulk up options, Crunch, Drain Punch, Fire Punch, Gunk Shot. Like, you have so much good coverage here. Stone Edge, Thunder Punch, blah blah blah. Like, under Trick Room, this thing is going to be a monster, because even the mons where you 2-hit KO, they're not going to KO you if you're at full HP. And man, you are going to be doing a ton of damage. And then, just in case you thought like Trick Room wasn't a viable option, they also have Klefki to set up screens for, like, they can just do Reflect, Light Screen, then Trick Room, and probably like Steel Beam Klefki just to let it die, so they can get in one of their more dominant threats and then just start sweeping you. Because under Reflect and Light Screen, these two are not dying. Like last year, Ursaluna are not dying under Trick Room. They're probably living like at least 3 hits, and they're doing tons of damage. Really love Klefki. I used it last season. Has a lot of potential here. Next we have Wug Trio. Of course, this is a little bit of the worst mons out of this whole thing, but overall still usable. Triple Dive is its signature move. I guess it is powerful than Liquidation, but it is a little bit sus because I think each hit is 95% accuracy. Gooey is like an okay ability, so you could Sucker Punch things. You can also Memento things. Also does have Aqua Jet and Priority, but it already is super fast. But it does have a decent attack stat, so maybe you run like Choice Band, Triple Dive. I don't know. Really, I've never used this thing before, but it doesn't seem like it can be that good, but also it can be good in some niche cases. Finally, Lycanroc Midnight, again, on the lower side of this thing, but this thing does get Stealth Rock. You can have this as a lead, as well as No Guard Stone Edge. Basically, if you are a person that doesn't like to miss, you will never miss again. You could also run some like Endeavor, Focus Sash strategies, I don't know, Swords Dance, Taunt, prevent your opponent from setting up Stealth Rock, so have this as a lead with Taunt can also be really powerful as well. And that is the Marble Falls Miniors. I think this is going to be a really hard team to take down. Obviously, in terms of weaknesses, they do have, like, it shows some, you know, decent ice weaknesses and fighting weaknesses, but overall I think this team is extremely solid, and people to deal with these 3 Regenerator mons and to just like Glacier, Ursaluna, like I feel like they have so many options too. This team is going to be extremely hard to break. This team is fire. So not to like say that the other teams are bad. I just feel like this team is going to be really scary to go up against because they think just things are not just going to die. Like, ugh, this is disgusting. So let's move on to the next person. All right, up next we have the Tampa Bay Tentacruels. Their team consists of Roaring Moon, Slowbro, Palosan, Crocalor, Skuntank, Floette, Thunderous T, Gudra Hisui, Lycanroc Dust, Florigato, and Skiploom. So when you look at this team initially, you think, okay, it's got some heavy hitters on here. Roaring Moon, Thunderous T, Gudra Hisurian, and Lycanroc Dusk is the Tera type. And the 3 Tera types that it has is Rock, of course, because it has to be one of your stabs. Because Lycanroc Dust with Tough Claws does a lot of damage to things. Fairy, which I think was an ideal typing to basically allow you to live more hits. Fairy does have good defensive typing, even though you are still weak to Steel. It does have a lot of good capable options, as well as I think it boosts your Play Rough, which this thing does get Play Rough. And then finally, the third one is Bug, which I think is a counter for ground types. Basically, this thing is weak to ground, so I think that was the main reason for going specifically for Bug type, as well as it probably allows you to hit something that this normally would not hit, I would assume. But overall, I think Lycanroc Dusk is a very, very good Tera Captain. But looking at this team, I think you kind of understand. I think the main purpose of this team is kind of ask the question of, when you're drafting, can you just go with a lot of heavy hitters, do a lot of heavy points, but then have some lower tier mons that don't cost all that much? So Florigato and Skiploom actually cost like the minimum amount of points, meaning they spent a lot of heavy points here as well as here, and then finalized it up with some extremely cheap stuff. So I will say the reasoning, by the way, I really like this team, but I think what might happen in some scenarios is if I'm opposing team and I see you're very top heavy and these bottom 2 are, you know, almost extreme. I mean, they're very niche depending on the matchup. They're almost like somewhat coming, but when I look at the squad, I'm like, okay, well, Roaring Moon, Slowbro, Thunderous T, Lycanroc Dust, Gudra Hisui, those are like, you know, almost must brings. Probably Palosan of the third. Like, you can probably mix up the last one, but I feel like it's a little bit top heavy. But of course, it's all dependent on the matchup. But I feel like people would be able to predict you more of like what threats are coming. But I will say I do like this team composition. I do like Bulky Water Slowbro. I like Palosan as the Stealth Rock option. It doesn't have good spikes, but I think that's totally fine because it does have a lot of offensive ways of dealing with things. Skuntank having Toxic Spikes is also extremely nice. The Lycanroc Dust has the Tera, I think is super strong. Roaring Moon can just Dragon Dance up. I mean, Roaring Moon is extremely strong. Of course, this team is weak to Fairy types, as I said before. If your opponent does have a strong Fairy type, they are able to spam that pretty freely. So that's definitely something to watch out for. Of course, it looks like you're also weak to Ice, but you do have Slowbro, which is pretty dominant way of dealing with that. But potentially, if there are some strong Ice types like last year, they might be able to put in a lot of work here. So I guess let's go ahead and hop into the nitty gritty. I guess also something that I should discuss is I don't think I see a Rapid Spinner. I think it's... Does Skuntank still get Defog? I don't think it does. Okay, so it doesn't. Okay. So I will say that's definitely one downside of this team of not having any hazard control. Basically, that means for you do need to play more offensively, because if you sit around too long and your opponent does set up hazards on you, they're really going to play a role. Of course, you could always run heavy duty boots on your squad, but that is restricting your item usage. So like Roaring Moon definitely wants to run booster energy. Slowbro definitely wants to run leftover. So does Palisand. Crocodile wants Evilite. You know, there's a lot of Pokemon on here that you don't want to run boots if you don't have to. So I will say, as far as I know, does Skiploom get? No way, Skiploom gets Defog, right? Yeah, nice. It does not. I will say having no hazard control is a little bit scary, but of course you have a lot of threats here. Like if someone just, you know, takes a turn to set up Spike, you might be able to just nasty plot once with your Thunderous T or your Roaring Move and potentially sweep, as well as Lycanroc Swords Dance. Like, you have a lot of options to punish people that set up spikes on you. You just have to take a more offensive approach to the matchup. So without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty. Roaring Moon, super busted mon, of course. Booster energy, doing your highest stat or speed. Very high attack stat, very fast too. Dragon Dance. I've never really understood this mon's signature move, Jala, because it prevents both the user and the target from switching out. Maybe that's good. Maybe run like a bulky variant. I don't know. That would be really cool to see, but I've never really seen it before. Dragon Claw, Iron Head, Acrobatics as well works really well with the booster energy. Crunch is probably the better move than Jawlock, to be honest. Earthquake, Fire Fang. Like, this thing gets crazy coverage to basically whatever like you think can try to set up on Roaring Moon actually can't, or prevent Roaring Moon from sweeping actually can't. So it's a very strong mon. Next, Slowbro, of course. Regenerator. This thing never dies. Ice Beam, Future Sight, Slack Off, Thunder Wave. Also just gets amazing coverage. Calm Mind, Earthquake, Flamethrower. Kind of very similar to Slowking. I think they get very similar moves, but this one does not get Chilly Resumption, but it's very bulky. Next we have Palisand, Water Compaction. I never really liked Water Compaction, although it can be useful like specific times, but I don't like that you're not immune to it. Like Well-Baked Body from Dashman is just Water Compaction, but for Fire types, but also you're immune. Like if Water Compaction was like +2 stages and you're also immune, this mon would be a lot better. But obviously this thing wants to set up Stealth Rock, Shore Up as a way of healing itself, Destiny Bond, just in case you aren't able to live another hit. Also gets access to Giga Drain, Shadow Ball, as well as Earth Power. This thing is definitely a special attacker. Excuse me. Sorry, it's getting late for me. This thing is definitely a special attacker, but physically defensive. Next we have Crocodile. Of course, this thing is going to be running Eviolite Unaware stuff. This basically can prevent other people from sweeping you, as long as you have Slack Off, Will-O-Wisp, and then you can run like maybe Encore if they want to keep setting up on you. Or you can also run Roar, which is really powerful to also prevent future setups. You can also run Yawn as well. Overall, I really like this mod, especially with Eviolite. With Eviolite, this thing's probably extremely bulky and really like Unaware because it does prevent sweeps. Next, Skuntank, Aftermath, really good ability just in case you want to just die. Explosion, also really cool. Sucker Punch. I mean, this thing gets Gunk Shot, Crunch, Flamethrower, Play Rough. Shadow Claw. It gets good moves, as well as it does get Toxic Spikes, and one of the only Pokemon that really gets Toxic, which is really important because maybe you can whittle down some of your threats. Like maybe you can't kill something offensively with Skuntank, but you can set up a Toxic to whittle it down for your future threats. Next we have Floette. With an Eviolite, this thing is especially defensively very bulky. And I think the mindset behind this is that this thing can still wish and baton pass into other mons. Also gets access to synthesis. Draining Kiss could potentially calm mind, depending on if their opposing team is strictly special attackers. But if they do have some physical mons left, this thing I don't think is going to be taking physical hits well at all. I think almost like maybe you run like a little bit of defense to counter stuff, but mostly this thing is all special defense. I would not even like think about investing into this because it's going to be very, very weak defensively. But maybe if you invest everything here with the Eviolite, it might just get you there. Who knows? Thunderous T, Volt Absorb, Volt Switch, Nasty Plot, and Windbolt Storm. I think this is the new move that's got. I don't know if it's actually like, I don't think it's worth compared to just Thunderbolt, because I mean more paralysis chance, but also your accuracy drop, as well as you get 10 plus power. I don't know. Ultimately, this thing is really powerful with the special attacking set, and does get good coverage. Dark Pulse, Flash Cannon, Psychic, Sludge Bomb. I think it still definitely doesn't get like great ways of dealing with ground types, but overall it does have stuff to hit them neutrally. Moving forward, Gudra Hisui has Sap Separa's ability, basically give it an immunity. Earthquake, Flamethrower, Flash Cannon, Thunderbolt. Again, this thing just like does not die to a singular hit, as well as has crazy coverage, so you can run this thing like bulky offense with max special attack, and you're doing a lot of damage while like never dying. You can also run a really cool Acid Armor or Curse. Does this thing get Body Press? Yeah, Acid Armor into Body Press and start sweeping like mostly physical threats that way. I think that would be really cool as well. Next, Lycanroc, Dust, Tusk Claws. Of course, this thing gets Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, Stone Edge, Excel Rock. A lot of moves buffed by or boosted by Tough Claws, Close Combat, Crunch, Fire Fang, Outrage, Play Rough, Psychic Fangs. Does get Stealth Rock, but I think you're definitely going to want to use this more offensively. It's in Headbutt and Trailblaze, which also could be important in case you do need to increase your speed slightly. Next, this is also the Tera Captain, so I do think with Swords Dance, Excel Rock, Tera Rock has a lot of potential to sweep teams. I definitely like that. Floragato. Okay, so this is definitely similar to Reboot, but does not have Flower Trick. So this definitely is a lot weaker, but overall you can still run it with Protein and do a lot of damage. Seed Bomb, Sucker Punch, U-Turn. I don't think Low Kick, Play Rough, Shadow Claw, Thunder Punch. Probably your best ways of dealing damage. It is a little bit on the weaker side, but it's still not terrible. You know what I mean? Like, you could still do some damage. You also have Leech Seed. I don't know. You can definitely be annoying in this way. At least threatening out Bulky Waters for sure. U-Turn also to get its Switch Initiative. Sorry. That's how you know it's getting late for me. This is definitely going to have to be the last team. I'm definitely going to have to split this up into 2 parts. Ultimately, I don't think Floragato is that strong. I think most teams will kind of walk it off, but maybe I'm disrespecting Floragato like that, so my bad, man. Next we have Skiploom. I really was like questioning this set a lot, but I think it can be really strong with a Leech Seed Eviolite subset. So you just Leech Seed substitute Synthesis spam and just ultimately like cause a lot of havoc, as well as you can run Encore and you can run Cotton Guard, which boosts your defense by 3. With Eviolite, you are definitely living physical hits and definitely doing a lot of strong damage. You also get Reflect and Light Screen, as well as Memento. You have a decent speed of 80, so you're outspeeding other walls. You also get Sleep Powder, which is really strong, Tailwind, and also U-Turn for some Switch Initiative, as well as you also have Baton Pass for another option for Switch Initiative. But you can't, of course, in this league, Baton Pass stats, they have to be dry Baton Pass. But I do think that this, in certain matchups, this could actually be very, very useful. So, overall, this team is missing a Rapid Spinach / Defogger, as well as it is a little bit weak to Fairy types, but you can definitely work around that. All depends on the matchup. Again, this document is not everything. And I think that's definitely it for me today. Please leave a like, comment, reach out to me on Discord if you have any issues, want some help on anything. I hope this was useful, to be honest. I know it's very late for me, and also I hope no one took offense from me critiquing the team. At the end of the day, it is just Pokemon, and also I'm not the best at Pokemon. Like, I lose all the time, so don't take me as like a doctor in the field, but I am definitely knowledgeable in the field. So yeah, I think without further ado, I'm gonna get out of here. Part 2 will be up another time. It's just really late for me. I do think during the season I will be able to do the games because it should only be 6 games, which it's best of 1, so I'm hoping they're not too long, because I do want to discuss them and I think it would be a lot of fun. But good luck to everyone in the Kalos Division, and thank you to everyone that watched this. So I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.